On a desolate stretch of County Road 12, Jack Harper finds a golden retriever tied to a fence post, a cryptic note tucked into its collar. The words, "Find the key. She needs you to remember," ignite a chilling mystery, pulling him toward a truth. Buried for 15 years, a locket with a child's photo, Lily Carter, long missing, whispers of secrets someone once uncovered. With the dog Scout as his guide, Jack steps into a web of danger and hope, where every clue could lead to salvation or peril. The morning air hung soft and cool over Willow Creek, a small town tucked into the folds of rolling hills where the world seemed to slow down just enough to let you breathe. Jack Harper stood alone on the gravel shoulder of County Road 12, his worn boots crunching against the loose stones. At 62, with silver threading his once dark hair, Jack was a man who carried his years quietly. Retired from the Willow Creek Fire Department after 30 years of service, now filling his days with long walks, half-read novels, and the occasional coffee at Millie's Diner. His broad shoulders still hinted at the strength that had once carried people from burning buildings, but his eyes, a deep hazel, held a gentleness shaped by loss and time. The road was quiet, save for the faint chatter of sparrows in the cedar trees lining the ditch, and the distant gurgle of the creek that gave the town its name. Jack had taken to walking this stretch every morning since retirement, a habit born partly from restlessness and partly from a need to feel the pulse of the town he'd spent his life protecting. The sky was a pale blue, streaked with wisps of clouds that promised a gentle day. He adjusted the faded baseball cap on his head, the one with the fire department's old insignia, and let his gaze drift across the landscape. That's when he saw it. A flash of golden fur near a weathered fence post about 50 yards ahead. Jack paused, squinting. A dog sat there, motionless but alert, its head tilted slightly as if it had been waiting for him. A golden retriever, by the look of it, with a coat that caught the morning light like a field of wheat. The dog didn't bark or whine, just watched him with eyes that seemed to carry a story. Jack's heart gave a small tug. Strays weren't uncommon out here, but this one didn't look like it had been abandoned. Its fur was clean, its posture calm, almost expectant. A thin rope tethered it to the post, looped loosely enough that the dog could have slipped free if it wanted to. He glanced up and down the road. No cars, no people, not even the hum of a tractor in the distance. Just him, the dog, and the quiet. "Well now," Jack muttered, his voice low and gravelly, the kind that could soothe a scared kid or command a chaotic scene. "What's a fella like you doing out here all alone?" He took a few steps closer, moving slowly so as not to spook the animal. The retriever's tail gave a single, deliberate thump against the grass, and its ears flicked forward. As Jack approached, he noticed the dog's collar, a sturdy band of dark green nylon, not cheap, with a metal tag glinting in the sun. Kneeling beside the post, he reached out a hand, letting the dog sniff his knuckles. The retriever leaned in, its nose cool and damp, and gave a soft huff, as if to say, "You're all right." Jack's lips quirked into a half-smile. "Good boy," he said, scratching behind the dog's ears. The retriever's eyes half-closed in contentment, but Jack's attention shifted to something else, a folded piece of paper tucked under the collar, secured with a bit of tape. His brow furrowed. This wasn't a lost dog poster or a vet record. The paper was crisp, deliberate, like it had been placed there hours ago. He glanced at the dog, who met his gaze with an almost human steadiness. "What's this about, huh?" Jack murmured. His fingers hesitated, a faint prickle of unease crawling up his spine. Something about the scene felt staged, like a moment someone had crafted just for him. He looked around again, still nothing but the rustle of leaves and the faint buzz of a bee somewhere in the clover. Carefully, he peeled the tape away and unfolded the note. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, in black ink. "Find the key. She needs you to remember." Jack's breath caught. The words hit like a stone dropped into still water, rippling through memories he'd long tried to bury. He turned the paper over, but there was nothing else. No name, no explanation. His eyes flicked back to the collar, and that's when he saw it. A small oval locket dangling beside the tag, its silver surface etched with a faint floral pattern. Jack's heart thudded harder now. He opened the locket with a gentle click, and inside was a tiny photograph no bigger than a thumbnail. A girl, maybe 7 or 8, with chestnut braids and a gap-toothed smile, stood in a field, clutching a sunflower. The image was faded but clear, and it struck Jack like a physical blow. He knew that face. Lily Carter, a name he hadn't spoken in 15 years, not since the summer she vanished from the town festival, leaving behind a hole in Willow Creek that never quite healed. Jack's hands trembled slightly as he closed the locket. He looked at the dog, who hadn't moved, its gaze still fixed on him like it knew exactly what he'd just seen. "Who left you here, boy?" he whispered, his voice barely audible. The retriever, Scout, he decided to call him, because it felt right, tilted his head as if urging Jack to keep going. The note, the locket, the dog, it was no coincidence. Someone had wanted Jack to find Scout, and not just to save a stray. They wanted him to remember Lily. He stood, the note crinkling in his hand, and scanned the horizon. The road stretched empty in both directions, but the weight of the moment settled into his bones. This was the start of something, a thread he couldn't ignore. Scout nudged his leg, a gentle push, and Jack nodded. "All right, Scout," he said, untying the rope. "Let's figure this out together." Jack Harper's truck rumbled along the familiar curves of County Road 12, the golden retriever he'd named Scout, sitting upright in the passenger seat. The dog's eyes flicked between the passing trees and Jack, as if he understood the weight of the moment. Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel a little tighter than usual, the folded note and locket tucked safely in the breast pocket of his flannel shirt. The words, "Find the key. She needs you to remember," looped through his mind like a song he couldn't shake. They were more than a message. They were a summons, pulling him back to a wound he'd spent years trying to leave. Behind Willow Creek's main street came into view, a modest stretch of brick storefronts and hand-painted signs. The town was waking up. Millie's Diner had its open sign glowing, and a delivery truck idled outside the hardware store. Jack's destination wasn't the diner or his quiet farmhouse, though. He turned left toward the sheriff's office, a squat tan building with a flagpole out front and a bulletin board plastered with community notices. Scout's ears perked as the truck slowed, his tail giving a single expectant wag. Jack parked and glanced at the dog. "So you're coming with me," he said, clipping a spare leash from his glove box onto Scout's collar. The retriever hopped out, staying close as they crossed the lot. The morning air carried the scent of fresh coffee from somewhere nearby, mingling with the earthy tang of dew-soaked grass. Jack's boots thudded against the pavement, each step grounding him against the unease curling in his chest. He'd seen a lot in his years as a firefighter, collapsing roofs, panicked faces, moments where life hung by a thread. But this felt different. This wasn't chaos. It was deliberate. Inside the sheriff's office, the receptionist, a young woman named Tara with a ponytail and a habit of chewing gum, looked up from her computer. "Morning, Jack," she said, her smile faltering when she saw the dog. "Didn't know you got a new friend." "Not exactly mine," Jack replied, his voice steady but low. "Found him tied to a post out on 12. Got something I need to show." "Clara." Tara raised an eyebrow but buzzed the intercom. "Sheriff Jack Harper's here. Brought a dog and a story, sounds like." A moment later, Sheriff Clara Bennett appeared from the back office, her uniform crisp despite the early hour. Clara was in her late 40s, with sharp blue eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor softened by a streak of compassion. She and Jack went back, decades from the days when she was a rookie deputy and he was hauling hoses. "Jack," she said, crossing her arms, "what's this about a dog?" Her gaze flicked to Scout, who sat politely at Jack's side, his golden fur catching the fluorescent light. Jack didn't waste time. He pulled the note from his pocket and handed it to her. "Found him this morning." This was tucked in his collar. He hesitated, then added, "There's a locket too, you're going to want to see it." Clara unfolded the note, her expression shifting from curiosity to focus as she read the words. She glanced up at Jack, then motioned him toward her office. "Tara, hold my calls," she said over her shoulder. Scout padded along, his nails clicking softly on the linoleum floor. In Clara's office, a small space cluttered with files, a coffee mug, and a framed photo of her daughter, Jack opened the locket and set it on the desk. The tiny photo of Lily Carter stared up at them, her sunflower and smile frozen in time. Clara's breath hitched just for a second before she schooled her features. "Lily," she said quietly, almost to herself. 15 years. "Yeah," Jack said, his throat tight. "I don't know who left him there, Clara, but they wanted me to find him. That note, it's not random." Clara leaned back in her chair, studying the note again. "Find the key. She needs you to remember. Sounds like someone's trying to tell you something, Jack. But why now? And why you?" She tapped the locket with her pen. "This isn't some kid's prank. This took effort." Jack nodded, his hand resting on Scout's head. The dog leaned into him, a warm, solid presence. He's no stray either. Clean, well-fed, trained. Someone cared for him before they tied him up out there. He paused, the weight of the next words settling in. "I think they're pointing me toward Lily. Or what happened to her." Clara's eyes narrowed. "You know that case was closed, Jack. No leads, no evidence beyond her backpack at the festival. Everyone figured she wandered off, or she didn't finish, but the unspoken hung heavy, or someone took her. You really think this dog's tied to it?" "I don't think," Jack said, his voice firm. "I know. Look at him, Clara. He's not just sitting there, he's waiting." Scout's eyes met Clara's, steady and unblinking, as if he understood every word. She sighed, setting the note down. "All right. We'll log the locket as evidence, get it dusted for prints. The note, too. I'll call animal control for the dog." "No," Jack cut in, sharper than he meant to. "He stays with me. If nobody claims him, I'll take him. He's part of this, Clara. I can feel it." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Fine. But you keep me in the loop, Jack. No going rogue." She stood, picking up the locket. "I'll start a file, see if we can pull anything from this. You going back to where you found him?" "Thought I might," Jack said, "see if I missed anything." Clara gave him a look that said she knew he wouldn't stop there. "Be careful, Jack. If someone's stirring this up after all these years, they've got a reason." Jack clipped Scout's leash and headed for the door, the dog staying close. As they stepped back into the morning light, he felt the note's words burning in his mind. Find the key. Whatever it meant, he was already in too deep to walk away. Scout nudged his hand and Jack gave him a quick pat. "Let's go, boy," he said. "We've got work to do." Jack Harper drove back to the spot on County Road 12, where he'd found Scout, the golden retriever now curled in the passenger seat, his head resting on the armrest. The truck's engine hummed softly, a familiar comfort against the storm of thoughts swirling in Jack's mind. The locket, now in Clara's evidence lockup, had cracked open a door to a past he'd tried to seal shut. Lily Carter's face, those braids, that sunflower, that smile, had haunted him for 15 years, ever since the summer she vanished from the Willow Creek Harvest Festival. He'd been there that day, working crowd control as a volunteer firefighter, his radio crackling with routine chatter until the call came in. Missing child, 7 years old, last seen near the Ferris wheel. The memory still tightened his chest. Scout let out a soft huff, as if sensing Jack's tension, and lifted his head to meet his gaze. Those deep brown eyes held a quiet intelligence, a knowing that made Jack's skin prickle. "You've got secrets, don't you, boy?" Jack murmured, reaching over to scratch Scout's ears. The dog leaned into the touch, his tail thumping once against the seat. Whatever Scout's role in this, Jack was certain of one thing. The dog wasn't just a messenger, he was a guide. The fence post came into view, standing alone in the grassy ditch where the road curved toward the creek. Jack pulled over, gravel crunching under the tires, and cut the engine. The morning had warmed slightly, the sun now high enough to cast long shadows from the cedars. He clipped the leash onto Scout's collar, though the dog hardly needed it. He stayed close, his steps deliberate as they crossed to the post. The rope that had tethered Scout was gone, likely taken by Clara's deputy for evidence, but the spot felt unchanged, like it was holding its breath. Jack crouched, running his fingers over the weathered wood of the fence post. His eyes caught something he'd missed earlier in the morning's haze. Faint carvings etched into the grain, barely visible unless you knew to look. He tilted his head, tracing the lines with a calloused fingertip. L+J, the letters small, but deliberate alongside a date, July 17th, 2010. Jack's breath caught. That was the day Lily went missing. His heart thudded, a mix of dread and adrenaline. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone had carved this years ago, or maybe recently, to mark this exact spot. He straightened, scanning the surroundings. The ditch sloped down to a narrow trail that wound toward the creek, partially hidden by tall grass. Across the road, a field stretched toward a line of trees, their branches swaying in the breeze. Nothing stood out. No footprints, no tire marks, no sign of whoever had left Scout here. But the carving, the note, the locket, they were pieces of a puzzle, and Jack was no stranger to puzzles. He'd spent years piecing together fire scenes, finding the spark that started it all. This felt like that, only deeper, personal. Scout nudged his leg, his nose pointed toward the trail. Jack looked down, meeting the dog's steady gaze. "You know something, don't you?" he said, his voice low. Scout's ears flicked, and he took a step toward the trail, pausing to look back as if to say, "Come on." Jack hesitated, then followed, letting Scout lead. The trail was overgrown, barely used, the kind of path kids might take to fish or skip stones. The creek's gentle rush grew louder as they walked, and Jack's mind drifted back to Lily. She'd been a bright spot in Willow Creek, the kind of kid who'd wave at firefighters from her bike or leave crayon drawings at the station. Jack had known her parents, Tom and Ellen Carter, decent folks who ran the local bakery. The festival had been packed that day, booths selling pies, kids chasing balloons, music drifting from a stage. Lily had been with her mum, wearing a yellow sundress, her hair in those braids. Then in a blink she was gone. The search had consumed the town, volunteers combing fields, divers checking the creek, Jack himself walking grids until his boots wore thin. They'd found her backpack near the fairgrounds, but nothing else. No witnesses, no leads. The case went cold, and the Carters left town a year later, broken. Jack had never forgiven himself for not finding her. He'd replayed that day 1,000 times, wondering if he'd missed something. A face in the crowd, a detail in the chaos. Now, with Scout at his side and the locket's photo burned into his mind, that old guilt was waking up, sharp and raw. But so was something else. Hope. If someone had gone to the trouble of leaving Scout, they believed Lily's story wasn't over, and they believed Jack was the one to finish it. Scout stopped abruptly, his nose to the ground near a cluster of rocks by the creek. Jack knelt beside him, brushing aside leaves. There, half buried in the dirt, was a small tarnished key, no bigger than a bottle cap, attached to a faded ribbon. Jack's pulse quickened. He picked it up, turning it over in his hand. It looked like it might fit a diary or a small lockbox, the kind a child might cherish. "Find the key," the note had said. This had to be it. He slipped the key into his pocket, his mind racing. Scout sat back, watching him with that same calm certainty, as if he'd known the key was there all along. "You're something else," Jack said, a faint smile tugging at his lips despite the weight in his chest. The key was a clue, but to what? A lockbox, a memory. And why leave it here, where only Jack and Scout would find it? He stood, the creek's murmur filling the silence. The trail stretched deeper into the woods, but Jack knew he needed to get the key to Clara, let her team analyze it. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that Scout was leading him somewhere, step by step, toward answers he'd been chasing for years. Lily's disappearance had been a wound in Willow Creek, but maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late to heal it. Jack Harper's farmhouse was a modest, weathered place at the edge of Willow Creek, its white paint peeling in spots, but its porch sturdy enough for late-night coffee and stargazing. Inside, the kitchen smelled of cedar and the faint tang of motor oil from years of tinkering in the garage. Jack sat at the oak table, the small key he'd found by the creek glinting under the light of a single bulb. Scout, the golden retriever, lay at his feet, his head resting on his paws but his eyes alert, tracking Jack's every move. The key felt heavier than it should, its ribbon frayed but still soft, like it had been handled with care. "Find the key. She needs you to remember." The note's words were a drumbeat in Jack's mind, each one pulling him deeper into a mystery he wasn't sure he was ready to face. He'd already called Clara Bennett, the sheriff, to report the key. She'd told him to bring it in first thing. Tomorrow for processing, fingerprints, trace evidence, the works. But Jack couldn't sit still. Not with Lily Carter's face staring up at him from the memory of that locket photo. He stood, pacing to the window where the moon hung low over the hills. Scout lifted his head, letting out a soft whine as if to say, "What's next?" Jack glanced down, a wry smile tugging at his lips. "You're not going to let me sleep on this. Are you, boy?" The dog's tail thumped once, and Jack knew he was right. He grabbed his jacket, the key, and a flashlight, clipping Scout's leash for good measure. "Let's go back," he said, more to himself than the dog. "See if we missed anything." The spot on County Road 12 wasn't far, and the night was clear, the kind of quiet that amplified every rustle and snap. Scout hopped into the truck, sitting tall in the passenger seat, his golden fur glowing faintly in the dashboard light. The drive was short, the road empty except for the occasional flicker of a deer's eyes in the brush. Jack parked near the fence post, the same one where he'd found Scout that morning. The carvings, L+J, July 17th, 2010, were still there, etched like a scar in the wood. He swept the flashlight's beam across the ground, looking for anything out of place. The grass was trampled where he and Scout had walked earlier, but nothing new caught his eye. Scout, though, had other ideas. The dog tugged gently at the leash, nose to the ground, pulling Jack toward the trail that led to the creek. Jack followed, the flashlight cutting through the darkness. The trail was narrower at night, the trees looming closer, their branches whispering in the breeze. Scout moved with purpose, pausing every few steps to sniff, his tail low but steady. Jack's heart beat a little faster, not from fear, but from the sense that they were closing in on something. The creek's murmur grew louder, and soon they reached the cluster of rocks where he'd found the key. Scout circled the spot, then sat looking up at Jack with those knowing eyes. "What is it, boy?" Jack crouched, sweeping the light over the rocks. He brushed away more leaves, his fingers grazing something hard and smooth. A flat stone, slightly out of place. He pried it up, revealing a small hollow in the dirt. Inside was a single faded bead, the kind a child might string on a bracelet. It was yellow, shaped like a tiny sunflower. Jack's breath caught. Lily had loved sunflowers. Her mom, Ellen, used to tell him how she'd plant them every spring, even if they never grew quite right. He slipped the bead into his pocket alongside the key, his mind racing. This wasn't random. Someone had hidden these clues. First Scout, then the note, the locket, the key, and now this bead, knowing Jack would find them. But why? And who? He stood, scanning the trail. The woods felt alive, watching, but not threatening. Scout nudged his hand, a gentle reminder to keep moving. "All right," Jack said, his voice low. "Let's head back. We'll figure this out." Back at the farmhouse, Jack spread his findings on the table, the key, the bead, and a notebook where he'd jotted down everything he remembered about Lily's case. He wasn't a detective, but he'd worked enough emergencies to know how to piece together a scene. Scout curled up nearby, his presence a steady anchor. Jack opened a box in the closet, one he hadn't touched in years, filled with old files from his firefighting days. He'd kept notes on Lily's case, unofficial ones scribbled during sleepless nights when the guilt wouldn't let him rest. He found a report he'd written himself, a detail that had always nagged him. A blue pickup truck seen idling near the festival's parking lot the day Lily vanished. The witness, a vendor selling kettle corn, hadn't gotten a plate number, and the Leadquan, the police, had dismissed it as irrelevant. Trucks were common in Willow Creek. But now, with the clues piling up, that truck felt like a loose thread. Jack jotted it down, circling it twice. He leaned back, rubbing his eyes. Scout let out a soft huff, and Jack looked over. "You think I'm onto something, don't you?" The dog's ears flicked, and he wagged his tail once, as if in agreement. Jack knew he needed to get the bead to Clara, but he also knew he couldn't stop here. The key, the bead, the carvings, they were leading somewhere, and Scout was the key to it all. He reached down, scratching the dog's head. "We're gonna find her, boy," he said, his voice firm. "Or at least what happened to her." For the first time in years, he felt a spark of purpose, a reason to keep going. Lily deserved that much, and so did Scout. Jack Harper woke to the soft thud of Scout's tail against the kitchen floor, the golden retriever lying by the table, where Jack had fallen asleep, his head resting on a pile of old notes. The faint light of dawn crept through the farmhouse windows, painting the room in hues of gold and grey. The key and the sunflower-shaped bead sat on the table, glinting like relics of a past Jack was only beginning to unravel. His neck ached from the awkward position, but his mind was sharp, buzzing with the pieces of the puzzle, the note, the locket, the carvings, the key, and now the bead. Each one felt like a breadcrumb leading him closer to Lily Carter, or at least to the truth about what happened to her. Scout lifted his head, his brown eyes meeting Jack's with that quiet intensity that had become familiar over the past day. "Morning, boy," Jack said, his voice hoarse from sleep. He reached down to scratch Scout's ears, and the dog leaned into the touch, a warm, steady presence. Jack glanced at the clock, barely 6 a.m. He needed to get the bead to Clara at the sheriff's office, but something told him to hold off for a few hours. The trail by the creek was calling, and Scout seemed to know it too. The dog stood, stretching, and gave a soft huff, as if urging Jack to move. After a quick breakfast of toast and coffee for Jack, and a bowl of kibble he'd picked up for Scout, they headed out. The air was crisp, the kind of morning where the world felt new, untouched. Jack grabbed his flashlight, a small shovel, and Scout's leash, though the dog rarely strayed. The truck rattled back to County Road 12, the fence post now a landmark in Jack's mind. He parked and let Scout lead, the retriever's nose immediately hitting the ground as they retraced the trail toward the creek. The path felt different in the daylight, less secretive, but no less alive. Birds chirped overhead, and the creek's gentle rush was a constant companion. Scout moved with purpose, pausing to sniff at roots and rocks, his tail low but alert. Jack followed, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. The spot where he'd found the key and bead was undisturbed, the flat stone still slightly askew. Jack knelt, running his fingers through the dirt, but found nothing new. "What else you got, Scout?" he murmured. The dog didn't hesitate. He trotted a few yards down the trail, stopping near a gnarled oak tree whose roots twisted into the earth like fingers. Scout pawed at the ground, his movements deliberate, and Jack's heart skipped. He grabbed the shovel and started digging, careful not to disturb more than necessary. A few inches down, the blade hit something solid. Jack dropped to his knees, brushing away the soil to reveal a small, rusted tin box, no bigger than a book. His pulse quickened as he pried it open. Inside was a child's bracelet, woven from colorful threads and adorned with tiny charms, a heart, a star, and another sunflower bead, identical to the one he'd found yesterday. Tucked beneath it was a folded piece of paper, yellowed but intact. Jack unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a drawing, clearly done by a child. A stick-figure girl with braids holding a sunflower, standing next to a dog that looked unmistakably like Scout. Below the drawing, in shaky crayon letters, was a single word: home. Jack's throat tightened. He could almost hear Lily's laugh, see her running through the festival with that boundless energy. The drawing was hers, he was sure of it. But how had it ended up here, buried in a box, with Scout leading him right to it? He looked at the dog who sat watching him, his expression calm but expectant. "You knew this was here, didn't you?" Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. Scout's tail wagged once, a silent confirmation. Jack slipped the bracelet and drawing into his pocket, next to the key and bead. The tin box was empty now, but its weight lingered in his hands. He stood scanning the trail. The creek sparkled in the morning light, and the woods stretched on, quiet but not empty. Someone had gone to great lengths to hide these clues, to ensure Jack found them. But why bury them? Why not come forward? The answer felt close, just out of reach, like a name he couldn't quite recall. Back at the truck, Jack let Scout hop in, his mind racing. The bracelet and drawing were more than keepsakes. They were evidence, pieces of Lily's story that someone wanted him to uncover. He drove to the sheriff's office, the artifacts carefully wrapped in a cloth in his jacket. Clara was at her desk, a cup of coffee in hand, her eyes sharpening when she saw Jack and Scout. "You look like you didn't sleep," she said, standing. "What's got you back so soon?" Jack laid the bracelet, bead and drawing on her desk, explaining where he'd found them. Clara's expression shifted from curiosity to something heavier as she studied the drawing. "This is Lily's," she said, her voice soft. "Ellen showed me one just like it, back when we were searching, same style, same sunflowers." She picked up the bracelet, turning it over. This was hers, too. She wore one like it every day. Jack nodded, his jaw tight. "Scout led me right to it, Clara. That dog's not just a stray. Hay's part of this, and someone's using him to get to me." Clara leaned back, her fingers drumming on the desk. "We'll send the box and these to the lab, see if we can pull prints or DNA. But Jack, this is getting bigger than a cold case. Whoever's behind this, they're playing a long game." She glanced at Scout, who sat quietly by Jack's side. "You sure you want to keep him? If this turns ugly—" "He stays with me," Jack said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "He's the only one who knows where this is going." Clara sighed but didn't push. "All right. I'm pulling the old case files. See if anything matches up. You should talk to some folks in town. Millie maybe, or Old Man Jenkins at the hardware store. They were around back then, might remember something." Jack nodded, already planning his next steps. The bracelet, the drawing, Scout, they were all tied to Lily, to that summer 15 years ago. And somewhere, buried in the quiet of Willow Creek, was the truth. He just had to keep following the clues and Scout. Jack Harper stepped out of the sheriff's office into the late morning sun, Scout at his side, the golden retriever's leash loose in his hand. Willow Creek was coming alive now. Kids on bikes zipped down Main Street and the bell above Millie's. Diner jingled as customers came and went. The air carried the scent of fresh bread from the bakery and the faint hum of summer life, but Jack felt a weight in his chest. The bracelet, the sunflower drawing, the key, they were more than clues. They were echoes of Lily Carter, stirring a town that had tried to move on from her loss. He could feel eyes on him as he walked, curious glances from folks who knew his face and sensed something was brewing. Scout's ears flicked, his head turning toward the diner across the street. Jack followed his gaze, remembering Clara's suggestion to talk to Millie. The diner was the heart of Willow Creek's gossip, a place where stories lingered like the smell of fried bacon. "Good idea, boy," Jack murmured, giving Scout a pat. They crossed the street, the dog's steps light but purposeful, as if he knew exactly where they needed to be. Inside Millie's, the air was warm, thick with the clatter of plates and the low hum of conversation. Millie, a wiry woman in her 60s with a grey bun and a perpetually flour-dusted apron, spotted Jack from behind the counter. "Well, if it ain't Jack Harper," she called, wiping her hands on a rag. "And who's this handsome fella?" She leaned over the counter, grinning at Scout, who wagged his tail in response. "Name's Scout," Jack said, easing onto a stool. "Found him yesterday, tied up out on County Road 12. He's special." He kept his voice low, aware of the half-dozen regulars within earshot, their forks pausing mid-bite. Millie's eyes narrowed, catching the weight in his tone. "Special, huh? You got that look, Jack. Same one you had back when you were searching for that little Carter girl." She poured him a coffee without asking, sliding it across the counter. "What's going on?" Jack glanced around, then leaned in. "Found some things with Scout. Things tied to Lily. A bracelet, a drawing, a key. Clara's looking into it. But I need to know if you remember anything from back then. Anything about Lily or the festival that didn't make it into the reports." Millie's face softened, her hands stilling. "Lily Carter," she said, almost a whisper. "Sweetest kid. Used to come in here with her mum, always drawing sunflowers on napkins." She paused, her gaze drifting to Scout, who sat quietly, watching her. "You think this dog's got something to do with her?" "I know he does," Jack said. "Someone left him for me to find with a note and a locket. I just don't know why yet." Millie leaned closer, her voice dropping. "You didn't hear this from me, but a few years after Lily went missing, maybe 12 or 13, I saw a girl in here who looked just like her. Same braids, same eyes. She was with a couple, quiet types, not from around here. The woman called her Emma, but I swear, Jack, it was like seeing a ghost. They paid cash, left quick, never saw him again." Jack's pulse quickened. "You tell anyone about this?" "Tried to," Millie said, shrugging. called the sheriff's office. But by then the case was cold and nobody followed up. Figured I was seeing things. She reached down, offering Scout a piece of bacon, which he took gently. This dog's got you digging up the past, don't he? Yeah, Jack said, jotting down her story in his notebook. He does. He left the diner with a promise to keep Millie in the loop, Scout trotting beside him. The town was buzzing now, and word of Jack's find was spreading. As he walked toward the hardware store to talk to Jenkins, a retired mechanic who'd been at the festival, he noticed people whispering, their eyes lingering on Scout. The dog seemed unfazed, his focus sharp, as if he sensed the ripples they were causing. At the hardware store, old man Jenkins was behind the counter, his glasses perched on his nose as he sorted screws. "Jack Harper," he said, squinting. "Heard you found a dog. What's the story?" Jack repeated the basics, keeping the details vague. "You were at the festival when Lily Carter went missing. Remember anything odd? Maybe a vehicle, someone out of place?" Jenkins rubbed his chin, thinking, "Funny you mention it." There was a blue pickup truck parked out by the fairgrounds near the back exit. Had a funny plate, out of state, I think. Maybe Ohio. I told the deputy, but they said it was probably nothing. Trucks come and go, you know. Jack's heart skipped. The blue pickup again, the same one from his old notes. "You ever see it around after that?" "Nope," Jenkins said. "But I always wondered. Didn't sit right. That truck just sitting there, nobody in it." Jack thanked him, his mind racing. The truck, Millie's story about the girl who looked like Lily, they were threads, thin but real. He stepped outside, Scout at his heels, and felt the town's pulse quickening. People were remembering, talking, piecing together fragments of a mystery that had never fully died. A woman at the bakery waved him over, saying she'd seen Lily's mom, Ellen, with a man in a blue jacket before the festival, someone she didn't recognize. A kid on a bike mentioned an old barn near the creek where weird stuff was buried, though he wouldn't say more. Scout nudged Jack's hand, pulling him back to the present. The dog's eyes were bright, his posture alert, as if he knew they were getting closer. Jack knelt, running a hand through Scout's fur. "How you're stirring up the whole town, boy," he said, a faint smile breaking through. "Let's keep going." He decided to check out the barn the kid mentioned, but first he'd update Clara with the new leads. The pieces were coming together, and Scout was at the heart of it. A golden thread weaving through Willow Creek's past and present. Jack felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of hope and determination. Lily's story wasn't over, and neither was his. The sun was dipping low over Willow Creek, painting the sky in streaks of orange and pink as Jack Harper walked Scout along the quiet streets back to his farmhouse. The golden retriever's leash hung slack, his step steady but alert, his nose twitching at every passing breeze. Jack's pockets were heavy with the weight of the day's discoveries, the key, the sunflower bead, the bracelet, and the child's drawing of Lily and a dog like Scout, all now safely stored at the sheriff's office, except for the notebook where he'd scribbled new leads. The town's whispers followed him. Millie's story of the girl who looked like Lily, Jenkins' memory of the blue pickup truck, the bakery woman's mention of a stranger in a blue jacket. Each fragment was a spark, and Jack felt the fire of Lily Carter's mystery growing. Scout's ears flicked and he paused, his gaze fixed on the shadowed alley between the post office and the library. Jack stopped, his hand tightening on the leash. The street was empty, the evening settling into a hush broken only by the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. "What is it, boy?" Jack murmured, squinting into the dark. Scout let out a low, rumbling growl, not aggressive but wary, his body tense. Jack's pulse quickened. He'd learned to trust Scout's instincts, and something about the moment felt off, like the air itself was holding its breath. He took a step toward the alley, but Scout tugged him back, his growl softening into a whine. Jack knelt, meeting the dog's eyes. "All right, we'll go home," he said, his voice low. "But you're telling me something's out there, aren't you?" Scout's tail gave a single deliberate wag, and he turned toward the farmhouse, pulling Jack along. The walk was brisk, the twilight deepening, and Jack's senses were on edge, scanning every shadow, every rustle of leaves. At the farmhouse, Jack locked the door behind them, a habit he'd rarely bothered with in Willow Creek. Scout paced the living room, his nose to the floor, then settled by the front window, his eyes fixed on the yard. Jack poured himself a glass of water, his mind replaying the day. The leads were piling up, but so was the sense that someone was watching, orchestrating this slow unraveling of Lily's story. He sat at the kitchen table, pulling out his notebook to review his notes, but Scout's sudden bark, sharp, urgent, cut through the silence. Jack was on his feet in an instant, grabbing the flashlight from the counter. Scout stood at the window, his front paws on the sill growling low. Jack pulled the curtain aside, his heart thudding. Across the street, a car sat idling, its headlights off, its shape barely discernible in the dark. The engine hummed softly, and for a moment Jack thought he saw a shadow move inside. Then, with a slow, deliberate turn, the car pulled away, its taillights fading into the night. Scout's growl faded, but he didn't relax, his eyes locked on the spot where the car had been. Jack's jaw tightened. "They're getting bold," he muttered. He checked the locks again, then grabbed his old baseball bat from the closet, leaning it against the wall by the door. Sleep wasn't an option tonight. He settled on the couch, Scout at his side, the flashlight within reach. Around midnight, Jack heard a faint creak from the porch. Scout's ears shot up, but he didn't bark, just stared at the door. Jack stood, bat in hand, and moved silently to the window. The porch was empty, but something caught his eye. A white envelope tucked into the mailbox, its corner flapping in the breeze. He waited, listening, then opened the door just enough to grab it, Scout pressed against his leg. Back inside, Jack locked the door and tore open the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the same neat handwriting as the note with Scout. "She's closer than you think. Keep looking." Below the words was a crude drawing of a sunflower, its petals uneven but unmistakable. Jack's breath caught. The message was a push, a warning, and maybe a threat all at once. Whoever was behind this knew where he lived, knew he was digging, and wanted him to know they were watching. He showed the note to Scout, half expecting the dog to react, but Scout just looked at him, his expression steady, almost encouraging. "You're not scared, are you?" Jack said, a faint smile breaking through his tension. Scout's tail wagged once, and he nudged Jack's hand as if to say, "We've got this." Jack tucked the note into his notebook, his resolve hardening. Whoever was out there, they weren't going to scare him off. Not when he was this close. He spent the rest of the night on the couch, Scout curled beside him, the bat within reach. His mind churned with questions. Who was leaving these messages? Why now, after 15 years? And what did they mean by, "She's closer than you think"? Was Lily alive, hidden somewhere in plain sight like Millie's story suggested? Or was this about something else? Guilt, closure, revenge? At dawn, Jack called Clara, filling her in on the car and the new note. She promised to check traffic, cams, and send a deputy to patrol his street, but her voice carried the same unease Jack felt. "So you're stirring something up, Jack," she said. "Be careful. Whoever's doing this, they're not playing games." Jack hung up, looking at Scout, who was now standing by the door, ready for their morning walk. The dog's calm certainty was a lifeline, a reminder that they were in this together. Jack grabbed the leash, the notebook, and his determination. The sunflower drawing, the idling car, the clues, they were all part of a path, and Scout was leading the way. Jack felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of fear and hope. Lily's story was alive again, and he wasn't going to let it slip away. Jack Harper woke to the soft nudge of Scout's nose against his hand, the golden retriever's warm breath pulling him from a restless sleep on the couch. The farmhouse was quiet, the early morning light filtering through the curtains in pale slants. The baseball bat still leaned against the wall, a silent reminder of the idling car and the sunflower-drawn note that had shaken him the night before. Jack's eyes felt gritty, his body stiff, but Scout's steady presence was like a tether, grounding him in the midst of the growing mystery surrounding Lily Carter. He sat up, running a hand through his silver hair, and looked at Scout. The dog's brown eyes were bright, his tail giving a slow, deliberate wag, as if he knew they had work to do. "You don't let up, do you, boy?" Jack said, his voice rough but warm. Scout tilted his head, letting out a soft huff that felt like agreement. Jack reached down, scratching behind the dog's ears, and felt a pang of affection. In just a few days, Scout had become more than a clue in Lily's case. He was a partner, a quiet companion who seemed to understand the weight of every step they took. Jack stood, stretching, and glanced at the kitchen table where his notebook lay open, filled with scribbled leads. The blue pickup truck, Millie's story of the girl who looked like Lily, the sunflower drawing from the envelope. The new note, "She's closer than you think. Keep looking," sat beside it, its words both a lure and a warning. He'd already texted Clara about it, and she'd promised to run the envelope for Prince, but Jack knew the real answers were out, there waiting for him and Scout to find them. He poured coffee and tossed Scout a piece of toast, which the dog caught with a graceful snap. "You're going to spoil me, keeping me company like this," Jack said, grinning. Scout wagged his tail, settling at Jack's feet as he sipped his coffee. The moment felt ordinary, almost peaceful, but it was laced with purpose. Jack couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this alive, this needed. Retirement had been a slow fade, his days blurring into routine, but Scout had changed that. The dog had brought Lily's mystery back to him, and with it a chance to make things right. After breakfast, Jack decided to take Scout for a walk, not to the creek, but through the fields behind his farmhouse. He needed to clear his head, to let the pieces of the puzzle settle. The fields were golden with late summer grass, the air heavy with the scent of earth and wildflowers. Scout bounded ahead, his leash unclipped, chasing a butterfly before circling back to Jack's side. The dog's joy was infectious, and Jack found himself laughing, a rare, unguarded sound, as Scout rolled off Scout's leash. Scout darted through the grass, his golden fur catching the sunlight, and Jack felt a warmth in his chest. "You're a good boy," he said, kneeling to ruffle Scout's fur. "Don't know what I'd do without you." They stopped at the edge of the field, where a low stone wall marked the boundary of Jack's property. Scout sat looking out at the hills, his ears twitching. Jack followed his gaze, his thoughts drifting to Lily. He wondered what she'd been like with Scout, or a dog like him. The drawing in the tin box with its stick-figure girl and dog had felt so personal, so alive. Had Scout been hers? Or was he trained to find these clues, to lead Jack to her? The questions gnawed at him, but Scout's calm presence kept him grounded. Back at the farmhouse, Jack decided to revisit the barn the kid on the bike had mentioned, the one near the creek where weird stuff was supposedly buried. He grabbed his shovel, flashlight, and Scout's leash, the dog's tail wagging as they headed to the truck. The barn was a mile from the fence post where Jack had found Scout, its weathered boards sagging under years of neglect. Jack parked and let Scout lead, the dog's nose immediately hitting the ground. Inside, the barn smelled of dust and old hay, the air thick with shadows. Scout moved to a corner, pawing at a pile of loose dirt. Jack knelt, his heart racing, and started digging. A few inches down, he found a small plastic case, the kind used for fishing tackle. Inside was a folded photograph, creased but clear. Lily, maybe 8, standing in a field of sunflowers, a golden retriever puppy at her feet. On the back, in the same handwriting as the notes, was a single line: "She never stopped waiting." Jack's throat tightened. He showed the photo to Scout, who sniffed it gently, then looked up at him, eyes soft but sure. "You knew her, didn't you?" Jack whispered. Scout leaned into him, a quiet answer. The photograph was another piece, another step closer to the truth. Jack tucked it into his pocket, his bond with Scout deepening with every clue they uncovered. He wasn't just following a trail, he was walking it with a friend. Jack Harper sat on the porch of his farmhouse, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the yard. Scout lay beside him, the golden retriever's head resting on his paws, his eyes half closed but alert, as if he could sense the storm brewing in Jack's mind. The photograph from the barn, a young Lily Carter with a puppy that looked like Scout, the words "She never stopped waiting" scrawled on the back, lay on the table beside Jack's coffee mug. It was another piece of the puzzle, but each clue seemed to raise more questions than answers. The key, the bead, the bracelet, the drawings, and now this photo were weaving a story Jack could feel, but not yet fully grasp. Scout's steady presence was the only thing keeping him grounded. The air was warm, heavy with the scent of cut grass and distant rain. Jack's notebook was open in his lap, filled with the leads he'd gathered. The blue pickup truck, Millie's sighting of a girl who looked like Lily, the stranger in the blue jacket, the idling car, and the sunflower-marked note that had appeared in his mailbox. The mystery was no longer just about finding Lily. It was about who was orchestrating these discoveries, leaving clues like breadcrumbs for Jack to follow. And why him? Why now, after 15 years of silence? Scout lifted his head, ears twitching, and let out a soft whine. Jack followed his gaze to the road, where a dust cloud signaled an approaching vehicle. He tensed, his hand instinctively moving to the baseball bat leaning against the porch rail. But as the vehicle drew closer, he recognized Clara Bennett's sheriff's SUV. She pulled into the drive, her face grim as she stepped out, a manila folder in hand. "Jack," she said, climbing the porch steps, "got something you need to see." She glanced at Scout, who wagged his tail once but stayed close to Jack. "This dog's got better instincts than half my deputies." Jack managed a half smile. "What's in the folder?" Clara sat across from him, opening the folder to reveal her grainy printout from a security camera. "We pulled this from a gas station cam near the creek, dated 2 nights ago, same night you saw that car idling outside." The image showed a man in a dark jacket, his face partially obscured by a cap, standing near a blue pickup truck. Jack's pulse quickened. It was the same kind of truck Jenkins had mentioned from the festival 15 years ago. "Any ID on him?" Jack asked, his voice tight. "Not yet," Clara said. "But the truck's plate is partial. Ohio, just like," Jenkins said. "We're running it through the system, but it's a long shot after all this time." She slid another sheet from the folder, a lab report. "The envelope you found last night?" "No prints, but the paper's high-quality, custom stock. Whoever's leaving these notes has resources." Jack leaned back, his mind racing. "They're not just watching me, Clara. They're guiding me. The key, the photo, the notes. It's like they want me to find something, but they're not saying what." Clara nodded, her eyes flicking to Scout. "And this guy's the key to it all, isn't he?" She reached down, scratching Scout's head. The dog leaned into her touch, but his gaze stayed on Jack, steady and sure. "I'm calling in a favor. With the state police, see if they can dig deeper on that truck. But Jack, this is getting serious. You need to watch your back." Jack didn't answer right away. He looked at the photo again, the words "she never stopped waiting" echoing in his head. The girl in the picture was Lily, no doubt, but the puppy, could it have been Scout, or a dog like him, trained to carry her memory? The thought sent a chill through him. This wasn't just a cold case anymore. It was a web, and he was caught in it. That evening, Jack took Scout to the creek again, hoping the familiar trail might spark something new. The barn where he'd found the photo was quiet, its shadows deeper in the fading light. Scout led him, past the barn this time, toward a narrow path that hugged the water's edge. The dog's nose was low, his tail stiff, as if he'd caught a scent. Jack followed, his flashlight cutting through the dusk. They stopped at a small clearing where the creek widened into a shallow pool. Scout pawed at the ground near a pile of rocks, his movements urgent. Jack knelt, his heart pounding, and started moving the rocks aside. Beneath them, half buried in the mud, was a waterproof pouch sealed tight. He opened it carefully, revealing a flash drive wrapped in plastic. Jack's breath caught. This was no child's keepsake. This was deliberate, modern, a leap from the analog clues he'd found so far. Back at the farmhouse, Jack plugged the flash drive into his old laptop. Scout curled at his feet. The drive contained a single video file, time-stamped 10 years ago. He hit play and the screen flickered to life. It showed a small room, dimly lit, with a girl, Lily, maybe 12, sitting on a cot, a golden retriever puppy at her side. She was drawing, her pencil scratching out sunflowers on a pad. A voice, male and clipped, spoke off screen. "She's adapting. We'll keep her here until the next phase." The video cut off abruptly. Jack stared at the screen, his hands trembling. Lily had been alive years after she vanished, and the puppy, it looked like Scout or his kin. The video was proof of something bigger, something organized. He called Clara immediately, his voice urgent. "I found a flash drive. You need to see this. It's Lily, Clara. She was alive, and someone was holding her. Clara promised to come, fly with a tech to analyze the drive. But Jack could hear the strain in her voice. "This changes everything, Jack. We're calling in the FBI. Stay put and keep that dog close." Jack hung up, looking at Scout, who was watching him with those knowing eyes. "You're leading me somewhere, aren't you?" he said, his voice soft. Scout nudged his hand, a quiet promise. The mystery was escalating, pulling Jack deeper into a truth he wasn't sure he was ready for. But with Scout by his side, he knew he couldn't stop now. Jack Harper sat in his farmhouse kitchen, the glow of his laptop screen casting shadows across the room. The flash drive's video of Lily Carter, alive years after her disappearance, played on a loop in his mind. A 12-year-old girl sketching sunflowers, a golden retriever puppy at her side, a cold voice mentioning the next phase. Scout lay at Jack's feet, his steady breathing a quiet anchor in the storm of revelations. The artifacts on the table, the key, the sunflower bead, the bracelet, the drawing, the photograph, and now the flash drive, were no longer just clues. They were evidence of something far bigger than a missing child case, something that reached beyond Willow Creek's sleepy borders. The clock ticked past midnight, but sleep was a distant thought. Jack's notebook was open, his pen scratching. Out connections, the blue pickup truck, Millie's sighting of a girl who looked like Lily, the idling car, the sunflower notes, and now this video. Each piece pointed to a deliberate effort, not just to hide Lily, but to control her, to keep her somewhere for some purpose. Scout's role was clearer now, too. The dog wasn't just a guide, he was a link to Lily, trained or bonded to carry her memory across years. Jack's hand rested on Scout's head, the retriever's warmth steadying him. "You're more than you seem, aren't you, boy?" he murmured. Scout's tail thumped once, his eyes meeting Jack's with quiet certainty. A sharp knock at the door jolted Jack upright. Scout's ears flicked, but he didn't bark, just stood and moved to Jack's side. Jack grabbed the baseball bat, his pulse quickening, and peered through the window. Clara Bennett stood on the porch, her sheriff's SUV parked in the drive, a woman in a dark coat beside her. Jack opened the door, bat still in hand. "Clara," he said, relaxing slightly. "Who's this?" "Jack, meet Emily Voss," Clara said, her voice tight. "She reached out to me tonight, said she has information about Lily. I vetted her, she's legit." Emily, a woman in her early 40s with tired eyes and a nervous posture, clutched a worn satchel. Scout sniffed her cautiously, then sat, his demeanor calm but watchful. Inside, Emily sat at the kitchen table, her hands trembling as she pulled a stack of papers from her satchel. "I was a teacher in Reading, about 50 miles from here." She began, her voice low. 10 years ago, I worked at a private school tied to a foster program. One of my students, I think she was Lily." Jack's heart skipped, but he stayed silent, letting her continue. "She went by Emma, but she drew sunflowers obsessively, and she had a dog, a golden retriever, just like him." She nodded. At Scout, who tilted his head. "Why didn't you report it?" Jack asked, his tone sharper than intended. Emily's eyes dropped. "I tried. I told the school director, but he shut me down, said I was mistaken. A week later, the girl was gone. Transferred, they said. I was fired soon after. I didn't know what to do until I saw the news about your dog and the reopened case." She slid a document across the table, a roster from the school with a name circled, Emma Lynn. Beside it was a photo of a girl with Lily's eyes, holding a sunflower. Jack's breath caught. "This is her," he said, his voice barely audible. Clara leaned in, studying the photo, her jaw tight. "There's more," Emily said, pulling out another paper, a list of names, dates, and addresses. The school was part of a network, a secretive adoption program. They took kids, orphans, runaways, sometimes kids who weren't either, and gave them new identities. I found this in the director's office before I was fired. It's incomplete, but it lists Emma and others, moved through foster homes across 3 states. Jack's mind raced. "Why Lily? Why take her?" Emily shook her head. "I don't know. But the program had funding, big money, private grants, and the dogs, they were trained not just as pets. They used them to track the kids, to keep them connected to their pasts, like emotional anchors." Your dog—" She looked at Scout. "He's one of them, isn't he?" Jack nodded, his hand resting on Scout's back. "He led me to every clue, the key, the bracelet, the video. Someone wanted me to find this." Clara flipped through the roster, her eyes narrowing. "One of the names on here, Thomas Reed. He's a council member in Willow Creek, been here for years. Quiet, keeps to himself. You think he's involved?" Emily's face paled. "Reed was a donor to the school. I saw him at a meeting once talking to the director. He didn't teach, but he had influence." Jack's stomach twisted. Reed had been at the festival 15 years ago, a minor official back then, always in the background. The blue jacket the bakery woman mentioned. Could it have been him? He looked at Scout, who was watching Emily, his ears up. "We need to talk to Reed," Jack said, his voice firm. "And we need to find out where Emma, went." "After that school," Clara nodded. "I'll bring Reed in for questioning, keep it low-key. But Jack, if this network's as big as Emily says, we're stepping on toes. The FBI's already involved. They're analyzing the flash drive. This could blow up." "Let it," Jack said, his eyes on Scout. "Lily deserves the truth, all." "Those kids do." Emily handed Jack a final paper, a map with a red circle around a rural address 2 counties away. "This is the last place Emma was sent, according to the roster. I don't know if she's still there, but it's a start." Jack took the map, his resolve hardening. Scout nudged his leg, a quiet reminder of their shared mission. The mystery had grown from a single dog tied to a fence post to a web of hidden children, trained dogs, and powerful players. But with Scout by his side and Emily's revelations lighting the way, Jack felt closer to Lily than ever. He wasn't just chasing clues now, he was chasing justice. Jack Harper's truck rumbled down a winding back road. The map Emily Voss had given him spread across the dashboard, a red circle marking a rural address 2 counties west of Willow Creek. Scout sat in the passenger seat, his golden fur catching the morning light, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, as if he knew where they were going. The weight of the past few days pressed on Jack. The key, the sunflower bead, the bracelet, the drawings, the photograph, the flash drive, and now Emily's revelation of a secretive adoption network that had hidden Lily Carter and others under false identities. The name Thomas Reed, the council member tied to the network, burned in Jack's mind. Today, they would confront him, and Jack hoped it would lead them to Lily. Clara Bennett followed in her sheriff's SUV, 2 FBI agents in, her 3rd vehicle behind her. The plan was simple: question Reed at his office, keep it quiet, and avoid tipping off anyone else in the network. But Jack's gut told him it wouldn't be that easy. Reed had been a shadow in Willow Creek for years, always present but never noticed, and the blue pickup truck, the blue jacket, the funding for the school, they all pointed to him. Scout's role was clearer now too, trained to track Lily, to carry her memory. He was the key to unraveling this web. Jack reached over, patting Scout's head. "We're close, boy," he said, his voice steady despite the tension coiling in his chest. They pulled into the town hall parking lot, a modest brick building with flower beds out front. Reed's car, a sleek black sedan, was parked near the entrance. Clara met Jack at the truck, her face set. "FBI's got a warrant to search his office if he doesn't cooperate," she said, glancing at Scout. "You sure you want to bring him in?" "He's part of this," Jack said, clipping Scout's leash. "He stays with me." Inside, the receptionist blinked at the group. Jack, Scout, Clara, and the 2 agents in plain clothes. "Mr. Reed's in a meeting," she said, her voice faltering under Clara's stare. "Tell him it's urgent," Clara said, flashing her badge. The receptionist scurried off, and moments later, Thomas Reed appeared, his tailored suit and calm, smile betraying nothing. He was in his late 50s, with thinning hair and sharp eyes that lingered on Scout a beat too long. "Sheriff Bennett, Mr. Harper," Reed said, his tone smooth. "To what do I owe the visit?" Clara didn't waste time. "We need to talk, Thomas, about a school in Reading, a foster program, and a girl named Emma Lynn." Reed's smile didn't waver, but his fingers twitched. "I'm afraid I don't. Follow. Perhaps we could discuss this privately." "Now," Clara said, gesturing to a conference room. The agents flanked the door as they entered, Scout staying close to Jack. Reed sat, his posture relaxed, but Jack caught the flicker of unease in his eyes, when Scout let out a low huff. Jack laid the photograph from the barn on the table. Lily. With the puppy, the words she never stopped waiting on the back. "This is Lily Carter," he said, his voice hard. "You knew her as Emma. You funded the program that took her, hid her. Where is she now?" Reed's face tightened, just for a moment. "You're mistaken, Mr. Harper. I'm a council member, not a conspirator. I don't know this girl." "Scout," growled softly, his ears back, and Jack leaned forward. "This dog led me to every clue, her bracelet, her drawings, a video of her in a room you helped pay for. You're in this, Reed. Talk or the FBI starts digging." Reed's composure cracked, his hands clenching. "You don't understand what you're dealing with," he said, his voice low. "That program, it was bigger than me, than all of us. They wanted data, control, the kids, they were collateral." "Where's Lily?" Jack pressed, his heart pounding. Reed hesitated, then sighed. "She's alive. Last I knew, she was moved to a safe house near the address on your map. But if you go after her, you'll expose everyone. Her, the others, yourself." Clara signaled the agents, who stepped forward. "You're coming with us, Thomas," she said, cuffs in hand. Reed didn't resist, but as he was led out, he looked at Jack. "You're too late. They know you're coming." Jack's stomach twisted, but he didn't falter. With Reed in custody, he and Clara drove to the address on the map, Scout riding shotgun. The safe house was a small cabin tucked in a wooded hollow, its windows dark. Clara and the agents cleared the perimeter, but Jack's focus was on Scout, who tugged toward a shed behind the cabin. Inside, they found a locked box, and the key from the creek fit perfectly. It opened to reveal a journal, Lily's, filled with sunflower sketches and notes about her life in hiding, her fear, and her hope that someone would find her. The journal's last entry, dated a month ago, read, "If you're reading this, you're close. I'm in Easton with Scout's help. Please hurry." Jack's heart soared. Lily was alive, and she was waiting. Clara called the FBI to coordinate a search in Easton, a town 30 miles away. That evening they found her, now 22, living under the name Emma, working at a flower shop. When she saw Scout, her eyes filled with tears, and she knelt, burying her face in his fur. "You found me," she whispered. Jack stood back, his throat tight, as Lily, Emma, hugged him. "Thank you," she said, her voice breaking. "I knew you'd keep looking." Scout wagged his tail, pressing against them both, the bond between them palpable. Jack Harper stood in the heart of Willow Creek's town square, the late summer sun bathing the cobblestones in a golden glow. The air was alive with the buzz of the annual Harvest Festival, reborn this year with a new purpose. Booths lined the streets, offering pies, handmade quilts, and jars of local honey, but the centerpiece was a row of sunflowers, their bright petals nodding in the breeze, planted in honor of Lily Carter. Scout, the golden retriever who had led Jack to her, lay at his feet, his fur gleaming, his eyes bright with a quiet contentment. The festival was more than a celebration. It was a homecoming, a healing, and Jack felt it in every smile, every handshake, every shared story. Lily, now going by Emma, though she was slowly reclaiming her old name, stood near a booth, handing out sunflower seeds to children, her chestnut hair tied back, her smile as radiant as Jack remembered from the Lockett's faded photo. At 22, she carried the weight of her years in hiding, but also a fierce resilience. She'd chosen to return to Willow Creek after the FBI dismantled the adoption network, her testimony helping to locate other children who'd been hidden under false identities. The journal she'd left in the safe house, filled with sunflower sketches and coded notes, had been a roadmap, exposing names like Thomas Reed and the shadowy figures behind the program. Reed was awaiting trial, and the network's collapse was national news. But for Lily, the real victory was here, in the town that had never forgotten her. Jack watched her laugh as a little girl clutched a sunflower seed packet, her parents nodding, gratefully. He felt a warmth in his chest, a mix of pride and relief. Scout had been the spark, the golden thread that pulled him back to Lily's case, and now the dog was a town hero, his leash adorned with a sunflower charm from the festival committee. Jack knelt, scratching Scout's ears. "You did good, boy," he said, his voice thick. Scout leaned into him, tail wagging, as if to say, "We did it together." Clara Bennett approached, her sheriff's badge catching the light. "Never thought I'd see this day, Jack," she said, her usual sternness softened by a smile. "Lily's back, the town's healing, and this dog's got more fans than the mayor." She handed Jack a lemonade, gesturing to the crowd. "You started this, you know, finding Scout following those clues." Jack shook his head, glancing at Scout. "He started it. I just followed." Clara chuckled, but her eyes held a quiet respect. She'd seen the case through with him, from the first note to Reed's arrest, and now she was coordinating with the FBI to ensure the other children were found. Emily Voss, the whistleblower, had moved to Willow Creek, helping Lily connect, with support networks and sharing her own story to keep the pressure on the program's remnants. Lily caught Jack's eye and waved him over. He crossed the square, Scout trotting beside him, and she hugged him tightly, her voice muffled against his shoulder. "I wouldn't be here without you," she said. "Or you, Scout." She knelt, wrapping her arms around the dog, who licked, her cheek, his tail a blur. "I used to dream about this place, about coming home. You made it real." Jack's throat tightened, and he managed a nod. "You kept fighting, Lily. That's what brought you back." She smiled, tears in her eyes, and handed him a sunflower seed packet. "Plant these," she said, "for next year." That evening, as the festival wound down, Jack and Lily sat on a bench, Scout sprawled between them, watching the last of the crowd drift away. The sunflowers glowed under string lights, a symbol of hope woven into the town's fabric. Lily spoke, softly, sharing memories of her years in hiding, the dogs like Scout who'd been her anchors, the sunflowers she'd drawn to remember who she was. Jack listened, his heart full, knowing she was healing step by step. "I'm staying," Lily said, her voice firm. "I want to help the others, the kids still out there, and I want to make this place home again." She looked at Scout, then at Jack. "Will you keep him? He belongs with you now." Jack nodded, his hand resting on Scout's back. "He's family," he said simply. Scout wagged his tail, as if he understood, and Lily laughed, the sound bright and free. The next morning, Jack walked Scout along the creek trail, the same path where they'd found the key, the bead, the bracelet. The air was cool, the world quiet except for the rush of water and the rustle of leaves. He planted the sunflower seeds Lily had given him near the oak tree, patting the soil with care. Scout sat beside him, his gaze steady, his presence a reminder of the journey they'd shared. Jack felt a peace he hadn't known in years, a sense that he'd kept his promise to Lily, to himself, to Willow Creek. Back at the farmhouse, Jack hung the sunflower charm from Scout's collar on the wall, a small monument to their victory. The dog curled up by the hearth, his breathing soft, his job done but his place secure. Willow Creek wasn't fixed. Scars lingered and other children still needed finding. But it was honest, alive, and growing. Jack sat on the porch, coffee in hand, Scout at his side, and watched the horizon. The world was brighter now, and that was enough.